My name is Miriam Sloan. I'm 71 years old. I was a financial analyst for over 3 decades. 23 of those years at Wexler and Gray, one of the largest investment firms in Boston. I retired 5 years ago. But even now, people still call me sharp. Too sharp, maybe, especially my family. The morning it happened, the house smelled like cinnamon and fresh linen. My granddaughter Lucy was playing in the den. Erin had just left for a networking brunch, and Delilah, my daughter-in-law, was in the kitchen making coffee. She walked in holding 2 steaming mugs. Her lipstick was perfect, her nails polished. She placed 1 cup in front of me and said, "Just for you." She smiled. Not wide, not warm, just precise. Something about that moment, the tilt of her head, the timing, even the faint almond scent from the coffee, pricked a nerve in my spine. I smiled back. "Thank you," I said, then waited until she turned to fix Lucy's jacket on the chair. That's when I switched the cups. I placed the one meant for me in front of Delilah's seat, took hers. Delilah returned, took a sip of the coffee now meant for me, and didn't say a word. We chatted. She asked about my old colleagues. I asked about her mother's arthritis. All very civilized. Until an hour later. She was loading the dishwasher when her breathing changed. It started as a cough. Then her hands trembled. She dropped a plate. Her knees buckled. She gasped, clawed at her chest, and collapsed. I froze. Not from fear, not entirely, but from the weight of something I already suspected, something my gut had screamed days earlier. I knelt beside her, checking her pulse. Weak, thready. Vivian, Delilah's mother, screamed and scrambled for the phone, calling 911. I didn't move. My eyes fixed on the ceramic mug on the counter, the one with the faded tulip print, the one I didn't drink. I hadn't been sure before. It could have been paranoia, suspicion bred from too many financial audits, too many betrayals. But when I saw her eyes roll back, when I saw her mouth quiver, I knew that cup was meant for me, and I'd save my life by trusting my instinct. My son demanded 150 $100 for a brilliant plan. I turned him down. 2 days later, his wife served me coffee with a smile. I switched it and saved my life. 1 hour later, she collapsed. It was Thursday morning. The rain hadn't stopped since midnight. I just finished trimming the azaleas when I heard Aaron's car pull up. He walked in without knocking, hair disheveled, eyes tired, shirt wrinkled and untucked. He looked like he hadn't slept or cared to. "Hi, Mom," he said flatly. He sat down before I could offer coffee, then pulled out his phone, scrolling, barely meeting my eyes. "I have an opportunity," he began. "A logistics platform, domestic, targeting the e-commerce mid-tier. It's the right time. We just need a seed round. You'd get equity." I didn't respond right away, just listened. Then I asked, "Where's the business plan?" He blinked. "It's not all written down. But I know the space, Mom, and I know the pain points. Delilah's cousin has connections in freight contracting. I raised my hand gently. "Aaron, you're asking for $150,000. That's not lunch money. It's an investment. Where's your roadmap, your forecasts, your fallback?" His jaw tightened. "You always need proof. You always need paperwork," he snapped. "I'm not a kid anymore." "No," I replied. "But this isn't about age. It's about accountability." He stood up, pacing. "So it's a no. I'm not saying no to you," I said calmly. "I'm saying no to a fantasy." Silence. He stared at me then. And in that silence, something changed. His eyes weren't pleading anymore. They were cold, calculating. Like a man who had been rehearsing this moment, not just the pitch, but the rejection. He didn't yell, didn't cry. He just said, "You control everything. My childhood, my job, my marriage. And now you want to control my future, Aaron." "I don't want to control you. I want to protect you." "From what?" "From failing." "No, from thinking failure is free." He picked up his coat, slid on his wet shoes, and looked back once with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "You'll regret this." Then he left. I stood in that room for a long while. The clock ticked, the fridge hummed, and all I could feel was distance, a deepening space between mother and son. He didn't want money. He wanted power, control. And when I didn't hand it to him, I saw what I wasn't meant to see. He wasn't alone in this. And Delilah. She never asked me anything, never pressured, never argued, but somehow her silence had weight. 2 days later, that silence became a smile. And that smile carried a mug. "Just for you," she said. But it wasn't. It never was. My name is Miriam Sloan, and control has always been my anchor. For 33 years, I advised high-net-worth individuals on wealth preservation, estate planning, and charitable structuring. I wasn't just a financial analyst. I became the person clients turned to when they wanted to ensure their legacy outlasted their lives. My students at Washington West University used to call me the firewall between impulse and inheritance. It was meant as a joke, but it wasn't wrong. After retirement, I didn't chase luxury cruises or join golf clubs. I spent my time reviewing nonprofit charters, helping friends draft legacy plans, and conducting free seminars on tax-efficient giving. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this money is never just money. It's memory, it's motive, and too often it's a weapon. I live alone now in a 3-story colonial home in a quiet suburb north of Seattle. Aaron and Delilah used to visit more often, especially after Lucy was born. But recently, the visits had become less about family and more about opportunity. Requests, hints, smiles with edges. The house itself is silent most days. I keep fresh orchids in the front room, and my library is alphabetized. I never remarried after Aaron's father passed. We had built this home together, but he didn't live long enough to retire in it. I keep his glasses in a drawer next to a letter opener he once carved for me in college. Control also means preservation of what matters. But lately my attention has shifted. I've been working on establishing something more enduring than property or portfolios. The Sloan Cognitive Foundation. It's a project close to the bone. My mother battled Alzheimer's for 6 years before she forgot my name, her own, and eventually how to swallow. Watching her fade was like witnessing a soul slowly step out of a locked room until no one was left inside. I promised myself then I would not leave this life without fighting that thief. The foundation will fund research into early detection, non-invasive diagnostics, and care models that prioritize dignity. I've partnered with a neurology lab in Vancouver, and I've already met with 2 board advisors from the Northwest Medical Trust. What most people don't realize is that establishing a Foundation 1 with a legally binding charter requires restructuring personal assets. It means moving your estate into a trust. It means appointing a fiduciary. And most importantly, it means your wealth no longer passes automatically to your family when you're gone. Aaron doesn't know that yet. He assumes he's the heir to everything: the house, the retirement accounts, the royalties from Dad's old software patents. He believes, like many do, that blood guarantees legacy. But I never believed in inheritance as a right, only as a responsibility. Every time I sign a new page of the foundation paperwork, I feel lighter. Not because I'm pulling something away, but because I'm giving it shape. This isn't an act of control. It's an act of clarity. And yet, somewhere deep in my chest, there's a ripple of tension. Because I know once the foundation is finalized, once the assets are transferred, there's no turning back. I haven't told Aaron. Not yet. And maybe that's my mistake. But I've seen what people become when money moves. They shift. They calculate. They scheme. Even the ones you've raised, especially the ones you've raised. I wanted to believe Delilah loved me, that her kindness wasn't performance, that her little gifts and dinners and warm texts weren't cover for something else. But even now when I picture her handing me that mug with that flawless smile, I wonder, had she known, had Aaron told her, or had she figured it out on her own? Either way, she was the one holding the cup, and I was the one who didn't drink it. And that's why I'm still here telling this story. Because control didn't just keep my finances in order. It kept me alive. Delilah was beautiful. No one could deny that. She had the kind of poise that turned heads in every room posture. Perfect words measured laughter light, but never too loud. The kind of woman who always brought something when she visited a box of artisanal chocolates, a scented candle, or a rare tea blend she claimed reminded her of her childhood. To others, she seemed like the perfect daughter-in-law. And in some ways, she played the part well. She never raised her voice, never argued, never missed a holiday. Always remembered my birthday. Always signed cards with love, Delilah. But there was something, always something that didn't sit right. Her eyes never matched her words. Even when she smiled, even when she thanked me for my roast chicken or complimented my scarf, there was a thin veil behind her gaze, a watching quality. She was always collecting, calculating. I told myself I was being paranoid, that perhaps I was projecting an old woman who had spent her career untangling fraud and financial manipulation, now seeing it in the shadows of her own family. I reminded myself that Aaron loved her, that they had built a life together, that Lucy was a happy, smart little girl who called me Grandma with such warmth. But I never forgot what Delilah said to me one evening, seemingly out of nowhere while we were clearing plates. "Children don't need to be rich," she said casually, her hands rinsing the dishes. "But a little foundation. So they don't drown when the tide comes. That's just thoughtful parenting." She didn't look at me when she said it. She just stared at the soap bubbles, but her voice carried something heavy beneath its sweetness. I nodded politely. I smiled, but that sentence nested in my mind like a thorn. It wasn't the words, it was the precision. Delilah never said anything without purpose. And she said it just a week after Aaron had asked me to fund his so-called brilliant business plan. I didn't confront her. That's never been my way. I believe people show you who they are if you let them speak long enough, but I started paying more attention. Delilah had access to my home, of course. She had keys. Sometimes she'd stop by when I wasn't there to drop something off, or pick up Lucy's forgotten toys. I didn't think much of it until one day I noticed a file on my desk had been slightly moved, just an inch, but enough. Inside that folder were preliminary documents for the Sloan Cognitive Foundation early drafts of the trust structure, my financial breakdown, the advisory board projections. Sensitive, yes, but not final. Still, it raised a flag in my gut. So I installed a discrete logging system on my home office door. Just a timestamp recorder, 3 entries when I wasn't home, all during times Delilah had swung by. Still, I said nothing. I waited. Then, a week later, my private banker at Coastal Heritage called. Very politely, he said, "Mrs. Sloan, I just wanted to confirm a follow-up you requested regarding the liquefiable assets in your long-term portfolio." I hadn't made any such request. He sounded confused when I told him that. He hesitated, said the inquiry had come through a third party, a Miss Delilah Sloan, claiming to be working on my estate transition. He didn't release anything, thank God. The firm requires verbal verification from me, which she didn't have. But she had tried. That night, I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, holding my father's pocket watch. The gears ticked calmly. It wasn't rage I felt. It wasn't even fear. It was recognition. Delilah wasn't a woman playing a part. She was a woman playing a game. And I had finally remembered the rules. I didn't tell Aaron. Not yet. Not even when he brought her over for brunch the following Sunday, and she handed me a tin of Earl Grey and said, "Just for you." Her voice was light, her eyes steady. But this time I looked right back, because I was done pretending I couldn't see the mask, and I had no intention of letting her win. Delilah arrived at precisely 10:04 a.m., not a minute early, not a minute late. She pulled into the driveway in her usual calm hybrid SUV, humming low sunglasses perched perfectly atop her head, a navy blue coat belted at the waist, like she'd stepped out of a catalog. I watched from the kitchen window, holding my breath, not because I was afraid, but because I had learned to stop giving her the benefit of the doubt. She rang the bell once, sharp, measured. When I opened the door, she greeted me with the smile she always wore, wide, polite, dazzling. "Morning, Miriam," she chirped. "I brought you something." In her gloved hands, she held a small tray with 2 paper cups nestled snugly in a cardboard carrier. Each had a name scribbled in her neat handwriting. One said D, the other Miriam. I glanced at her. She was glowing. Lipstick just pink enough, nails pale lilac. "I made them fresh," she said. "Yours is Ethiopian vanilla with a dash of oat milk, the brand you love." I hesitated for half a second, smiled back. How thoughtful. We moved into the kitchen. She set the tray on the counter and removed her gloves. "It's chilly out today," she said, rubbing her hands together. "Hope this warms you up." I picked up the cup labeled with my name. The lid was still warm. The paper sleeve smelled faintly of cinnamon, but there was something else. Something faint. A trace of bitter almond. It hit me like a ghost. Back in 1999, I had consulted on a forensic audit involving a failed cosmetic surgery clinic in Houston. A woman had died on the table. Cardiac arrest, they claimed. But it wasn't the surgery. It was the coffee she drank before it. Cyanide, hidden under layers of vanilla syrup. I remembered the case because the evidence had been missed twice until a junior analyst caught the scent on a piece of gauze discarded too close to the sink. That scent lingered in my mind like smoke. And now, here it was again. Delilah moved toward the napkin holder. "Oh, I forgot to bring tissues." "Mind if I grab one?" I nodded, placing the cup back in the tray. As she turned her back, I reached for the other cup. Delilah's. Same shape, same lid, but no scent, no almond. I swapped them quickly, silently. When she turned around, I was holding what was now mine. She didn't notice. Or if she did, she hid it well. We sat. She sipped once. I didn't. I stirred the coffee slowly, watching her over the rim. She talked about Lucy's piano lessons, about a new brand of organic detergent she found, about Aaron's growing stress from trying to launch his business. I nodded politely, responded when needed. She didn't ask why I wasn't drinking. I didn't offer an explanation. 10 minutes in, she began to blink more often, shift in her seat. By minute 15, she stopped talking mid-sentence, looked down at her hand like she couldn't remember how it got there. "Are you all right?" I asked gently. She smiled faintly. "Just a bit lightheaded." "Must be the weather." She stood, then stumbled. Her coffee spilled slightly on the edge of the table. "Miriam, I think I—" And then she collapsed. Right there, on my kitchen floor, face pale, lips trembling. I stood, calm, unmoving. Then I walked to the phone and called 911, my voice steady. "There's been an emergency. A woman has collapsed. Yes, breathing is shallow." As I waited, I looked at the cup she had meant for me. Still half full, still warm. I thought of Aaron. I thought of Lucy. I thought of the woman Delilah had pretended to be and the one she actually was. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Because somehow, in the deepest part of me, I had known this day would come. And she had chosen the cup. She just didn't know. It wasn't hers. The paramedics hadn't arrived yet. Delilah lay sprawled across my tiled kitchen floor, her chest, heaving face drained of color. Her eyelids fluttered like the wings of a bird caught in a trap. Then she started to cough, harsh, dry, violent. It didn't sound like a cold. It sounded like her lungs were trying to expel something foreign, something they were never meant to contain. Vivian burst through the back door at that exact moment, somehow always arriving at the most performative second. "What happened?" she cried, voice piercing. Her eyes darted from Delilah to me, to the tray on the table. Before I could say a word, she shrieked, "Does anyone have an EpiPen? She might be allergic to something. She didn't eat anything, did she?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came. Aaron came next, still in his undershirt, phone in hand, already pretending to talk to dispatch. My wife collapsed. "Yes, she's breathing barely. Please hurry." Then he dropped the phone onto the counter, ran over, and dropped to his knees beside her like a dutiful husband. "Delilah, baby, Can you hear me? She coughed again. Her fingers clawed at the tiles. I don't understand, he said, looking up at me, eyes wide and fake with panic. She was fine this morning. She just brought coffee, said she was stopping by. She wanted to be nice. He looked at the tray, then at me. Did she drink yours by mistake? Vivian gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh, God, was it poisoned? Poisoned. They both said it like it was an idea that just occurred, like it hadn't already been rehearsed in their minds. I stayed seated. One hand rested on the table, the other on my chest, because that's when it hit me. The coffee hadn't been meant for Delilah. It had been meant for me. I looked at the cup, hers now empty, the other still full, still warm, my name written across it in neat cursive. Miriam. If I had taken even one sip, I felt my heart thump under my palm. Heavy, slow. I imagined a different timeline, one where I trusted too easily. One where I let my guard down for one polite smile. One just for you. And in that version of the morning, I would have been the one on the ground. Not Delilah. Not the woman who had planned it. I stood slowly steadying myself on the chair. Aaron looked up at me, tears now conveniently forming in the corners of his eyes. What happened? He asked. What was in the coffee? I wanted to ask him the same thing. Instead, I said nothing. The sirens approached fast. Vivian ran outside to wave them in. Aaron hovered over Delilah, muttering, "Hold on, baby, hold on." I watched them both. Watched the way her hand reached weakly for his. Watched the way his face flickered just for a second, as though he realized the performance might not be enough to undo the mistake, because the wrong person had taken the sip. I stepped back and leaned against the wall, feeling the coolness of the paint against my spine. And in my head, just one thought repeated itself. If I hadn't known what to smell for, I'd be in that ambulance. That knowledge, the strange comfort of old forensic cases, the scent of bitter almond, the instinct not to trust pretty masks had saved me. Not luck, not grace, but the cold, clear preparation of a woman who'd seen too much to believe in coincidence. I heard the EMTs rush in. I heard Aaron explaining too much too quickly. I heard Delilah's soft, weakening voice say, "I don't feel..." And I heard my own voice in my head whispering what I would never say aloud. This wasn't an accident. You just drank your own lie. And maybe truth had a taste after all. The emergency room buzzed with the clinical rhythm of ordered chaos, nurses passing swiftly monitors, beeping steadily, the faint scent of antiseptic laced with something much heavier. Guilt. Or the performance of it. I sat quietly in the hallway outside Trauma Room 3. My hands rested in my lap, fingers intertwined, my posture calm. But beneath my skin, I could feel the tightening coil of something old and primal, the instinct to prepare for the war. I didn't look up when the officer entered. I had already seen his reflection in the polished floor tiles as he approached. "Mrs. Sloan," he asked. "I'm Detective Mercer. Would you mind stepping in for a few questions?" I nodded, once stood, and followed him. Inside, Delilah lay on the hospital bed, hooked up to fluids and an oxygen tube. Her complexion was less alarming now. Color had begun to return to her face, but her eyes remained distant, calculating behind their mask of frailty. Aaron stood beside her, holding her hand. His thumb caressed her knuckles in soft, practiced strokes. I knew that motion. I'd seen his father do it once right before telling me he wanted a divorce. Delilah turned her head slowly toward the officer. She made me the coffee, she whispered hoarsely, as though the words required great strength. She said, "It's just for you." She smiled. The words were carefully spaced, soft, like a child's bedtime story, but designed to detonate. Aaron's brow furrowed. "That can't be right," he said, turning toward me, then the officer. "My mother, she wouldn't." But his voice lacked conviction. And worse, his eyes didn't hold mine. He looked down at the bed instead. I met the officer's gaze steady. "That's not true," I said calmly. She brought the coffee. She handed me the cup. I never touched hers. He glanced at Delilah. "Do you remember switching cups?" She blinked. "No, I drank what she gave me." There it was. Just enough ambiguity to make her look innocent. Just enough certainty to make me look guilty. The officer nodded. "We're treating this as a medical emergency right now, but there will be a preliminary inquiry. Toxicology is already underway." I gave a slow, even breath. "Of course." He turned back to Aaron. "You were there when the coffee was delivered?" Aaron hesitated. "Not in the kitchen, but I saw her with 2 cups. One had Mom's name on it." I narrowed my eyes. "And did you see who handed which to whom?" He hesitated again. "I know. I just assumed." He trailed off, glancing at Delilah. "Assumed," I echoed. "Interesting word." The officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we'll need you to stay available for follow-up." "Of course," I said again, and walked out before he could dismiss me. In the hallway, I stopped by the vending machine. Not to buy anything, just to breathe. I wasn't just being set up. I was being framed with precision, with rehearsal. And what stunned me more than the cruelty of it was the coordination. Aaron and Delilah were in sync, whether by love or strategy. It didn't matter anymore. In their minds, I had already been buried socially, legally, perhaps even literally. What better way to access an inheritance early than to smear the legacy holder I returned home that evening to find my front door unlocked? Nothing missing. But a subtle shift in my office drawers told me someone had been searching. They weren't done yet. Later that night, I sat in my study turning over every detail from the hospital. She made me the coffee. She said, "Just for you." She smiled. Delilah knew exactly how that would land with law enforcement. A woman of my background, moneyed, opinionated, powerful, always gets side-eyed first. Especially if she isn't warm. Especially if she doesn't perform weakness. But I wasn't about to be their silent victim. I opened my laptop, began compiling timelines, phone records, security camera footage from the house. Because if there's one thing I've learned in my decades advising high net worth clients, it's this. The evidence never lies, but the people closest to you often do. 2 days after the hospital incident, I opened my front door to find 2 detectives waiting. One male, one female, both with the calm, unreadable faces of people trained to listen more than they speak. "Mrs. Sloan," the woman said, showing me a warrant. "We're here to conduct a search of your residence related to the toxicology report." I stepped aside wordlessly. They began in the kitchen cataloging containers, scanning the coffee machine, checking expiration dates on spices, teas, and over-the-counter pills. Then they moved on to my study. One officer thumbed through my planner, while the other flipped open my notebooks. They were looking for intent, anything handwritten. I watched from the hallway, keeping a mental inventory of what they touched and where they lingered. The woman paused at my second drawer, the one I kept my donation records in. From that drawer, she pulled a single loose sheet of paper, folded in half. She opened it slowly and raised a brow. Then she called over her partner. I stepped closer. It was a list, 3 items written in block letters. 1. Delilah. 2. Cyanide, Z3MG. 3. Control. Back my breath caught. The handwriting, it mimicked mine. Not quite, but close enough to suggest familiarity. Deliberately so. I stared at the page. The ink was fresh. I hadn't written that. But convincing someone else, that wouldn't be difficult. Especially with so many papers in my office bearing my notes and budgets over the years. Whoever planted this had studied me. Studied the slant of my R's, the habit of underlining certain names the way I always wrote control in capital letters. "How did this end up here?" I asked. "That's what we intend to find out," the male detective replied. They moved next to the laundry room, small, tucked away behind the kitchen. There wasn't much to search, just detergent and ironing board, and a tall cabinet where I stored old candles, mismatched batteries, and spare light bulbs. That's where they found the vial, a small clear glass container with a metal screw cap. No label, no markings, just resting behind the bleach, as if it had always belonged. The female detective pulled out a pair of gloves and carefully bagged it. "What is that?" I asked. "We'll send it for analysis," she said, "but it appears consistent with containers used to store liquid or powdered toxins." I felt something cold wash through me. Not fear, something deeper, more insulting. They were staging a narrative, and it was working. Later that evening, I sat in my kitchen staring at the place where the coffee had been set just days ago. Delilah's words echoed in my mind. "Just for you." Now I understood. They hadn't just planned to poison me. They planned to bury me with evidence so thin and yet so devastatingly believable that even the closest observer would question me. The motive was prepackaged: a powerful mother, unwilling to let go of her son, desperate to control the family fortune. The villain, an aging woman with no alibi and plenty of reason. They were rewriting my life into a stereotype. And the world loves a good story, especially when the antagonist looks just like me. The following morning, I received a polite but firm email from the university where I guest lectured. They were suspending my teaching sessions, pending clarification of recent allegations. In a single paragraph, 30 years of integrity had been paused. I called my attorney. I didn't have a criminal defense lawyer, I had a trust litigation expert, but he gave me a name. That same afternoon, I began working with a forensic handwriting analyst. She would compare the note to dozens of my existing documents. "I've seen this before," she said, during our second meeting. "It's called simulation with modification. Whoever wrote this copied your strokes but altered pressure and flow. Subtle but traceable. Finally, a sliver of light. Still, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the invisible hand pressing down on every part of my life. They had planted the note. They had planted the vial. They had planted doubt. And even though I could feel the truth vibrating inside every cell of my body, I knew none of it would matter unless I could expose the choreography behind this entire show. Because if there's one thing worse than being betrayed by your own blood, it's realizing they rehearsed it together. When your name is smeared, your world shrinks. Calls stop. Invitations vanish. People smile less around you, like guilt might be contagious. In that quiet, I remembered Camille Estrada. 12 years ago, she was just another exhausted grad student in my business ethics seminar. Brilliant, guarded sharp as broken glass. She worked nights as a barista and still turned in essays that read like published op-eds. Now she was a rising star in white-collar defense law. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. But she'd once told me over coffee, "If you ever need someone to believe in your truth when the world stops listening, call me." So I did. Within 2 hours, Camille was at my kitchen table, her laptop already open. I read the hospital report, she said. Delilah's condition was anaphylaxis, not cyanide poisoning. But that's not the story people are hearing. I nodded. "And the note? And the vial planted," she said without hesitation. "But I need to prove it." She moved fast. First, she accessed Delilah's financial records. Not easy. But Camille had connections in digital forensics. A few subpoenas, a few leveraged favors, and she got in. Delilah had withdrawn $3,000 in cash 5 days before the incident. That by itself meant nothing. But Camille cross-referenced that withdrawal with Delilah's rideshare records. Delilah uses Uber for everything, she said, except that one day. That day, she used a private driver, a man named Randall Sims. We tracked him down. He worked part-time as a personal chauffeur for upscale clients. Discreet? Professional? Camille met him at a diner under the pretense of conducting a client background check. Randall, older and plainly dressed, seemed nervous when Camille brought up Delilah's name. "I didn't sign an NDA," he said, after a long pause. "But I was told not to talk about that day." Camille leaned in. "Mr. Sims, my client, is facing felony charges, all because of that day." Randall looked at me. I didn't say anything, just held his gaze. Something cracked in him. "She got in with an envelope of cash," he said. "Told me to take her to a supply shop on Mercer. Chemical grade. Said she needed something to clean drains, but she didn't want it on her record. She asked if I could pay with my card. She paid me double. Camille pressed. Did she say what chemical? Randall hesitated. She was reading from her phone. Something cyanide, powdered form. My stomach clenched. Camille didn't blink. Did you record any of that? For your safety? Randall nodded slowly. My dashcam records audio. It autosaves for 72 hours. I forgot to wipe that week. He handed over a USB. Back at my house, Camille plugged it into her laptop. There it was, Delilah's voice, calm, measured. I need it to be small-dose cyanide, food-soluble. Do you think they'll sell it under a different label? Then silence. Then her again. He likes black coffee. She always drinks tea. If I give it to her after lunch, it won't be suspicious. My chest constricted. I felt both violated and vindicated. She meant me. Camille sat back. This is enough to reopen everything. I covered my mouth, not to cry, but to keep myself from screaming. All those years of distrust in my gut, they had roots. Camille reached across the table, her voice firm. This is just the start. We'll use this subpoena, the supply store's security footage, the employee records, and prove she orchestrated it. I nodded slowly. Camille smiled, but not kindly. They underestimated you, Professor. But I never did. There are rooms that smell of despair, not because of anything specific, but because too many broken souls have breathed inside them. The visitation room was one of them. Fluorescent lights hummed above. Everything felt gray. Not just the walls, but time itself. I didn't expect her to come. Miriam Sloan, my late husband's second wife, Delilah's mother, my grandson's grandmother. She walked in slowly, hands clutching a tan purse like a life vest. She sat across from me, no makeup. Her eyeliner had run and dried like cracked ink. I waited for an accusation, for a plea, for anything. She cleared her throat. Her voice was raspier than I remembered. Miriam, I saw the bottle. Her fingers trembled. That little brown vial with the taped lid. It was in Delilah's purse, the night before. I knew it wasn't hers. I leaned in staring. She avoided my eyes. I thought maybe it was medication, she said quickly. Or something for migraines. But deep down I knew. My heart hardened. You knew it was poison. Vivian didn't deny it. I suspected, she whispered. But I thought maybe it was for protection. Or something foolish. I didn't think she would... Really? She stopped. Try to kill me. I finished the sentence for her. Tears welled in her eyes. I never wanted this. Yet you said nothing, I replied. Vivian pressed her palms together as if praying. She's my daughter. My only child. She tried to murder me. She looked at me now. Fully. I know. We sat in silence. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It's a signed affidavit, she said. I've told Camille everything. How Delilah forged your handwriting. How she manipulated the note. How she planted the vial. I saw her days before rehearsing her tone, how she'd say it was just for you, like a performance. I took the paper, not to read it, but to feel its weight. Vivian wept silently, her body trembling. I was a coward, she said. I thought by keeping quiet, I could keep my daughter safe. But I nearly helped bury another woman alive. I didn't offer comfort. I couldn't. But I nodded once. That was all. The courtroom was cold. I wore navy blue, no jewelry. Camille sat beside me, calm as ever, a storm in a tailored suit. Vivian took the stand, swore in, hands shaking. She looked like a ghost of herself. When the prosecutor asked if she had any connection to the events of the alleged poisoning, Vivian inhaled sharply. I found the bottle, she said, in Delilah's things. Gasps rippled across the room. I knew it was something terrible. I asked her, but she laughed, said I was too old to understand the stakes. What stakes, the prosecutor asked. She said Miriam was cutting them off, that without the money they'd be left behind, that Miriam cared more about a foundation than her own blood. The judge instructed the courtroom to settle. Vivian's voice cracked. She didn't say she'd kill her, but she said, "Some people need to be reminded who holds the cup." I lowered my gaze. Camille gave my arm a gentle squeeze. Vivian continued. I thought she was just angry, spoiled, dramatic. I didn't think she'd actually follow through. "And what did you do with this knowledge?" Mrs. Sloan. Vivian broke down, shoulders shaking. "I did nothing. I watched the news. I saw Miriam's arrest. I told myself maybe she really did it, because that was easier to believe than admitting I had let evil grow in my own house." She turned toward me, eyes swollen, voice raw. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I protected a lie." No one spoke. The silence was heavier than the gavel. The judge had to call for recess. In the hallway, I stood next to Camille. Reporters whispered, cameras stayed respectfully distant. Vivian passed me slowly. We didn't embrace, but as she walked by, she said quietly, "You were the mother I never dared to be." I didn't reply, but something inside me shifted. Not forgiveness, but release. I once believed that silence between a mother and child was a wound. Time would naturally heal. That space would soften the sharpness. That silence was simply pause, never full stop. But some silences arrive with teeth, and they bite when you least expect. A week after Vivian's testimony, a prison email arrived from Aaron. The system notifies you before the message loads. An inmate has contacted you. Open with caution. I did not hesitate. Subject: I don't know where to start. Message mom. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to read this even if it's the last thing I ever get to say to you. I never thought it would go this far. I didn't know Delilah had it in her. I didn't know about the chemical, the planning. I didn't know she would actually try to hurt you, but I guess that's the problem. I didn't want to know. When you said no to the investment, something snapped in me. I felt like you never saw me as enough. Not smart enough, not strong enough. I thought maybe Delilah did. She said we deserved more. She made me believe we were being punished for dreaming too big. So I let her do the talking. I let her push. I ignored the signs. I wanted the money more than I wanted the truth. And for that, I am sorry. You didn't deserve this. I know you've always tried to help people even when it meant putting yourself last. You've helped strangers launch dreams, set up scholarships, built foundations. But your own son, I became blind and weak and greedy. I'm not asking you to reply. I just wanted you to know. I remember everything. The way you made waffles on Fridays, the crossword puzzles we used to race through, how you read to me at night even when I was 12 and pretending I was too cool for bedtime stories. Somewhere along the way, I lost all of that. And you lost me. But you should never have had to lose your life. I hope someday, somehow, you can forget the worst of me and remember something better. I'm sorry, Mom. I read it once, then again. The words weren't defensive, but they weren't brave either. They wobbled between remorse and self-pity. He said he didn't know. But what kind of son sits at the table with a poisoned cup in front of his mother and doesn't ask where it came from? What kind of man sees the greed in his wife's eyes and mistakes it for ambition? I stared at the screen unmoved, and I wrote back only one line. You chose money. I chose life. I didn't send a signature. No love, no mom, no second chances. Just a truth he'd have to sit with longer than any prison sentence. People think that surviving something like this is the hard part. But surviving is simple. It's automatic. Your body does it for you. What's hard is standing firm when the world wants you to fold just to look soft. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was having tea with 3 women I'd known for over 2 decades. Former colleagues, neighbors, co-volunteers. These were women who had marched for reproductive rights in the 80s, taught workshops on financial literacy for single moms, fought for seatbelts in school buses, women of steel who raised children on minimum wage or buried husbands too soon. And yet, even they looked at me with something between sympathy and suspicion. Don't you think Carol began gently that maybe you've been a bit too hard on him? Another chimed in. I mean, Miriam, I can't imagine what you went through, but he's your son, your only child. My fingers gripped the rim of my teacup. They meant well. I knew they did, but it stunned me how quickly some people mistake pain for pettiness. He wrote to you, didn't he? Carol asked, not unkindly. I nodded. He did, and I answered. Silence hovered. Then Karen, the boldest among them, said it outright. I guess I just don't understand. If he regrets it, if he wasn't the one who poisoned you, why not give him a second chance? I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, because love is not an antidote for betrayal. Karen blinked, but he's your son. And I smiled, small, quiet, calm. Yes, he is. I could tell they wanted me to say more, that they were waiting for a mother's rationalization, a concession, a softness to settle the discomfort in the room. But I gave them nothing more, not because I was angry, but because I had finally learned I owed no one a performance of pain. Later that night, I stood at the edge of my garden. The wind moved through the rosemary and lavender, brushing against my legs like old memories. I thought of the things I never said in that room, how I wanted to explain that motherhood is not martyrdom, that when a son watches his wife feed his mother a poisoned drink and stays silent, the umbilical cord is already severed by choice. That forgiveness is not owed just because someone shares your blood. That boundaries are not cruelty. They are survival. I remembered the phrase Delilah once whispered across a dinner table. Your generation clings to legacy. Ours just wants a head start. And I had smiled back then, pretending not to notice the calculation behind her smile. But now, with clarity sharper than any blade, I understood what she meant. They didn't want inheritance. They wanted entitlement on demand without merit. The next morning, I typed a private note into my journal. People will tell you a mother should forgive, but they rarely ask what a mother must survive first. I sold the house. The walls held too many echoes, whispers of arguments, sharp silences, and the soft thud of betrayal I never saw coming. It was the same home where Aaron took his first steps, the same staircase Delilah used to descend slowly in her carefully chosen outfits every holiday dinner. But once a house becomes a battlefield, you never look at the hallways the same again. So I let it go. I donated most of the furniture, kept just one photograph, the one where my late husband, young and grinning, held baby Aaron in one arm and waved with the other. We were happy once. At least I thought so. Then I turned my attention to the foundation. I renamed it. Not the Sloan Cognitive Foundation anymore. Now it's called Safe Families. We specialize in supporting elderly individuals who are victims of financial abuse, especially by their own family members. The irony isn't lost on me. At press events, I never share my personal story. I sit in the audience smiling at survivors as they recount their journeys, how they lost everything to a child's manipulation or a grandchild's coercion. I listen. I take notes. I offer solutions. But I never say this happened to me too, because my story isn't a banner. It's a scar, a reminder of how fast love can twist into entitlement. There was a time when I thought legacy was about wealth. Now I know it's about boundaries. It's about making sure the next woman doesn't have to swap coffee cups to stay alive. The work is hard. Some nights I go home and sit in silence, letting the quiet soak through me. Other nights I stare at my inbox, reading desperate messages from mothers afraid of their own children. The betrayal runs deep. And it's always the same line. But they're my baby. I raise them. How could they? I don't have the answer, but I help them rebuild anyway. We connect them with legal aid, help them move, get new accounts, start over. One woman, 78, retired school principal, hugged me last month and said, "You saved my life." I didn't cry. I never do in public. But that night, I allowed myself one tear. Just one. Then I opened the drawer, pulled out my ledger, and began planning our next chapter. Because this fight, this quiet war between generations, it doesn't end with one trial. It continues in bank accounts, in whispered conversations, in subtle power shifts that go unnoticed until it's too late. But not on my watch. Not anymore. Vivian comes in twice a week. Every Tuesday and Friday at 9:00 a.m. sharp, she walks through the front doors of safe families, hairpin neatly tote bag full of therapy journals and peppermint tea sachets. She never brings up Delilah. And I never bring up Aaron. We sit in meetings together, review case files, talk funding strategy. But mostly, we just do the work. We support victims of quiet betrayal, the kind that doesn't leave bruises but empties retirement accounts. Vivian is good with people. She listens patiently, nods slowly, holds space in a way that makes the elderly feel seen. You'd think her life had been full of kindness, not covered in ashes. But pain changes people in two directions. It either breaks them down or builds them differently. She chose the second. Last winter, a woman came in with tear-streaked cheeks and a trembling voice. She'd signed her house over to her son. He left her a week later claiming she was a financial burden. Vivian offered her tea, held her hand, and said, "I stayed silent too long once. But I see you. You're not alone." That was the day I realized something unspoken between us had shifted. We would never be friends, but we had become something else. Two women who had both failed to act soon enough each for different reasons, and now carried the consequences in silence. Sometimes she lingers after meetings. We sit in the break room watching the rain blur the city skyline. She once said, "I thought being a mother meant covering for your child's worst. But it also means protecting others from the harm they might cause." I nodded. It was the closest thing to an apology I ever received. And it was enough. We don't attend social functions together. We don't share birthdays or holidays or anything more than our mission. But we share the weight. There's comfort in that. Knowing someone else understands the terrible calculus of choosing truth over love. Not everyone could. Not everyone did. Vivian did. And now she helps others do the same. In a world obsessed with forgiveness, we represent something different closure. Not the warm kind, not the Hollywood ending, the honest kind, the hard-won kind, where two women sit across from each other, sip tea, and say, "We can't fix what happened, but we can make sure it doesn't happen again." Every day we show up, we build a fence around another mother's future. Every week, we restore power to someone who thought they had none left. And every month when the board reviews our impact report, I remember quietly, without drama, why I survived. Not to punish, not to preach, but to rebuild. Smarter, stronger, together. Vivian stayed, not because she owed me, but because she owed herself. I now live in a small wooden house tucked away in a quiet Oregon town. The kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked, where fog drapes over the hills like a soft blanket in the early mornings. My house sits on a hill with a balcony that faces the mountains. It's not large or fancy, just warm. Just mine. Each morning I wake before the sun fully rises. I make coffee slowly. I grind the beans by hand. I boil the water on the stove, not in some automated machine. And when I pour that first cup into a ceramic mug, I always lift it to my nose before I take a sip. Not because I'm afraid, but because I've learned that small acts so small they seem insignificant can save your life. A single switch, a moment of listening to your instincts, the awareness to pause. That day in my kitchen, I chose to listen. That day, I lived. I remember Delilah's voice as she handed me that cup. "Just for you? How sweet she sounded. How gentle her smile. That moment replays in my head not as a trauma, but as a reminder. I trusted her once. I let my guard down because she was family, because she called me mom and offered to help with dinner and folded laundry with me, because she pretended so well even I, an expert in assessing financial risk, didn't calculate the emotional kind. For so long, I blamed myself. I replayed Erin's request over and over in my mind. Maybe I could have said it better. Maybe I could have asked more questions, or offered a different kind of help. But every path I retraced still led me to the same conclusion: he wanted money. I wanted integrity. He chose ambition. I chose survival. I've spent the last year trying to understand how we got here. How a mother and son once so close could end up on opposite sides of a courtroom, a glass wall, a moral line neither of us would cross back over. But I don't wake up angry anymore. I don't cry over what I lost. Because in losing their version of family, I gained a clearer version of myself. I've built something new with the ashes. The Safe Families Foundation now has 7 branches across 3 states. We've helped elderly women reclaim stolen assets, offered counseling to survivors of domestic financial abuse, and even published a free resource guide for estate planning that protects against manipulation. And Vivian. She's still here. She works with us quietly, humbly. We don't speak of that night. We don't need to. We both live with its echo. I didn't forgive Erin, but I forgave myself for believing too long that love was a reason to ignore the signs, for trying to keep peace when I should have raised the alarm, for almost drinking a cup of coffee that wasn't meant for me. Sometimes I wonder where he is emotionally, if he still believes I'm the villain in his story, or if he sees now that he gave away his future in exchange for an illusion of power. That's his burden, not mine. The sun begins to cut through the clouds. I take my coffee to the porch. The wood creaks beneath my steps. My breath fogs slightly in the cool air. And I smile. I sit in the rocker blanket over my lap, hands warm around my cup. It's quiet, except for the birds and the soft hiss of wind through the pines. And in that moment, I am more than a survivor. I am a woman reborn. They chose betrayal. I chose life. And this time, it's mine. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee in your hand, or a late night where stories like this keep you company and help you reflect? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with deep gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like Miriam's, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, we hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.